Captain America. I'm Kamala Khan.
Few games following in Destiny's footsteps have done so with a universe quite as enticing as Marvel's Avengers. It's a loot-based brawler full of superhero flavor, but even the joy of hitting villains in the face with Captain America's shield can only carry it so far. While its single-player campaign is good on its own merits, the endgame loot grind that's meant to be the meat of this meal is an overly repetitive and surprisingly buggy mess.
Tony, Thor, the cables! I'll handle them. Detonator.
The roughly 10-hour campaign stands as a fun beat-em-up that tells a great story. Jumping between 6 different Avengers to pummel AIM robots is nearly always enjoyable, but the campaign also isn't afraid to hit pause on spectacle for more intimate character moments. Sandra Saad's Kamala Khan, aka Miss Marvel, is delightful, both as an endearing protagonist and the ideal vehicle for us to enter this story.
Whoa. This is amazing.
Troy Baker's Bruce Banner is also exceptional, and the dynamic between the two is at the heart of this tale.
Let me help.
Thanks.
The majority of the campaign's missions are unique, tailored around whatever hero it gives you to control at the time. The best of them remind me of games like Tomb Raider or Uncharted more than Destiny. Unfortunately, the story will also occasionally ask you to run through dull and generic open worlds and AIM facilities that are later recycled to death in most of the multiplayer missions. It's also noticeable that character progression suffers due to Avengers' overall focus on multiplayer. You'll barely scratch the surface of each hero's skill trees before the credits roll, and gear isn't much more than an occasional annoyance throughout. So you could mostly ignore the multiplayer if you just want an entertaining comic book action game. It delivers that, but you can't fully avoid the negative effects of its treadmill design.
What's happening here?
The city's collapsing.
Both the superhero power fantasy and combat fundamentals of Avengers makes it fun to smash enemies as the Hulk, shoot them with Iron Man's repulsors, or throw Thor's hammer at them for a while. It's just all a bit one note. Most fights devolve into mashing the light and heavy attack buttons against an army of familiar robots, though you do have to be smart about dodging and breaking enemy guards. Despite their signature moves and styles, which are impressively diverse, doesn't really change no matter who you're using.
Let's shake this up!
The big exceptions are each hero's 3 unique heroic abilities, which help them feel more mechanically varied, especially as you begin altering them in their skill trees. These trees aren't nearly as deep as they look, but they do hold some cool choices. Things like letting you change how Iron Man's Unibeam behaves. My Captain America could keep his Brooklyn Brawler attack buff heroic up nearly constantly by stringing together takedowns, but someone else could focus him around taunts and defense instead. There are some neat decisions to make here, even if there aren't quite enough to keep progression interesting all the way to the level 50 cap. But while the combat system has a decent amount of depth on paper, actually taking advantage of that complexity never really seemed necessary. Using animation cancels to juggle enemies in the air or stacking elemental effects from gear wasn't all that important when I could often just as easily win by button mashing. That's not really the combat system's fault, it's how the missions and enemies themselves ask you to make use of it. Or, more accurately, how they don't. Once you beat the campaign, you'll be directed toward the multiplayer-focused endgame, and that's where everything really starts to disassemble. Almost immediately, I started recognizing the same sets of objectives, building layouts, and optional points of interest. Whether you start in the Utah mountains or a snowy tundra, you'll usually end up in a generic AIM facility before long. And if you've seen one AIM facility, you've seen them all. Special mission types don't offer much relief either. Villain missions just slap a boss fight recycled from the campaign on the end, which are devoid of strategy with 4 players. Vault missions reuse the same initially novel combo lock puzzle every time. Hives, which bill themselves as a more important assault on an AIM base, are really just a longer one.
Coming at ya!
Even each hero's iconic missions are essentially just the same thing packaged up with a little story and some slightly changed visuals. The only thing keeping me playing was an arbitrary main mission chain, which culminated in another even more repetitive version of a Hive. Currently, the endgame is devoid of unique content. Another big problem at the center of Avengers is its loot system. It's an unsatisfying mess of mostly invisible improvements and almost nothing in the way of unique or exciting gear, leaving the repetitive levels with no carrot on a stick to entice you through them. This is one of the exact problems both Diablo 3 and Anthem had at launch. Apart from elemental effects, nothing in your gear changes is cosmetic either. That makes some logical sense for superheroes with iconic looks, but it doesn't make for compelling RPG progression. The only way to change your look is with cosmetic skins.
Isn't that one amazing?
Those can be purchased with real money, but I was happy to see cool options are earned at a fairly quick pace just by playing. Look, I've had plenty of fun grinding for power in games like Warframe and Destiny, but Avengers' grind is a deadly combo of tedious repetition and dull reward. There's no tantalizing items or unlocks to chase, and the new loot you get never alters how you look and rarely influences how you might play. When nothing changes from mission to mission, I quickly ran out of reasons to play them. On top of those structural issues, good gravy does Avengers just need some good old-fashioned bug fixes. Here's just a slice of what I've seen in around 36 hours of play. The problems generally aren't game-breaking at least, but I still saw consistent frame rate issues when fights got busy. There are just so many distracting wrinkles that need ironing out. Strangely though, I am cautiously optimistic about the future of Avengers. Crystal Dynamics does have an update plan laid out, and all future heroes and their story content will be added free of charge, starting with Kate Bishop's Hawkeye. I'm excited about that part, at least assuming they don't just reuse more multiplayer missions to flesh out those story missions too. Marvel's Avengers has a fun and endearing superhero campaign, but it's tied to an endgame that's so unrewarding it gave me little reason to keep playing. The combat can definitely be enjoyable, and the superhero flavor throughout is top-notch, but the loot system is an unsatisfying mess, and its limited mission variety is recycled ad nauseum, not to mention the surprising amount of technical rough edges. There is a nugget of something cool here, but it's going to take more than Terrigen Mist to transform it into something that feels worth my time. Be sure to head over to IGN.com to read my full, in-depth written review, or watch some gameplay to see Avengers in full swing. And for everything else, keep it right here on IGN.
The Abomination clone is defeated. Well done, Avengers.